All right, welcome to the December edition of our Azure Service Operator community call. I've shared the link to the Google Doc in the Zoom chat here. And with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So, first of all, just some quick roadmap updates. This month is pretty light considering that we are heading into the holidays pretty soon here. But some things that we're looking at finishing out for this calendar year. We've had a lot of questions around multi-tenancy. So we have this GitHub issue on being able to configure separate sets of credentials for different AKS namespaces. Christian, do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. That's going well. Yeah, the key thing is that it will enable one deployment of the operator to manage resources for different subscriptions or credentials, essentially. And we've got a couple of different models for that, both at the namespace level, but one is where those credentials would live in the same namespace, and one is where they would be off in a separate administration namespace. That's sort of to handle the situation for when the people who are managing the resources is a separate group of people from the ones who are managing the credentials and sort of provisioning those. So that's coming along. That basic model is going well. It's sort of not far off being ready. We also have been talking to some other teams that we're sort of want to build on top of ASO and to see what kind of things they need from multi-tenancy. One of them's the CapZ team. CapZ is how we'd say it here, but I guess everyone calls it CapZ, which they currently have a multi-tenancy story that needs even more fine-grained sort of allocation of credentials to resources. So none of that's incompatible with what we're doing. It's just that'll be a sort of an extra layer of places to check for credentials, which we'll add later on, but that won't be in the first cut of the multi-tenancy stuff. Also, as a part of that, we were sort of talking about integrating AAD pod identity into the sort of support for that more into how we do the multi-tenancy. That needs a bit more thought yet, but none of the stuff we're doing is incompatible with that. Again, it's going to be, there's a bit more work after that first block of namespace level credentials to support AAD pod identity with them. But yeah, that's where we are, I think.
Sounds good. Thank you, Christian. And then after that, we have an update coming to our Helm chart. We've also been working on adding Active Directory support to MySQL. I believe that this is something that we've closed out. Is that right, Dave?
Yeah, that one is, that PR is closed now, so I guess we can update that issue as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's
moving it live to the done column.
Love it.
Yeah, and we've also had this larger initiative around supporting more Azure resources through code generation. That's been an ongoing project. I think maybe George had something to add on there.
Yep. So we've had quite a lot of things complete since the last month's meeting. Where's my notes? Here we go. We've got added support for resources which have names that are required in Azure. So for example, the storage team has resources that have to be named default or they don't work. So we've added support for that and for validations in the CRDs. So the settings that you've chosen get validated when they get inserted into Kubernetes rather than later when you try and actually have the reconciler run. We've started fleshing out our test suite. We've added auto generation for various unit tests that we want to run against the CRDs, and we've also got support for full end-to-end testing. So Matt has written the first kind of edition of the controller. At the moment, it's not production ready, but it's used to validate that the things that we're actually generating do work against Azure. So we have got that running for a few of the resource types where we create and delete them against live Azure. Aside from that, we support we've added support for doing record replay style testing. So we can do the test run and record all the interactions with Azure and then play that back later, so we can run those tests very quickly, and also means that external contributors to the repository will be able to have their PRs validated in the same way, because the way that GitHub works, you can't use secrets to validate PRs from external contributors, so that they can't steal the secrets. So that works really well. What else? We support generating webhooks now, which we're using to default some of the settings on when the CRDs are loaded. And also, Christian has added support for some Azure resource types require the ability to insert raw JSON into the CRDs. So we support that as well. So yeah, we're getting to the point where it's all coming together, and we're getting a bunch more resources onboarded and kind of bless them and move them into a fully supported scenario later on. Obviously, the controller is the main thing that needs more work and testing at the moment, so that will be the next phase.
Awesome. George, do you know where folks can find a list of the Azure resources that we plan to support with the first cut of these code generated?
No, we've got the list internally. I'm not sure if we've publicized it. We should make a issue in our Kate's info repo alongside the rest of the code.
Yeah, I thought Matt was going to create an issue, but I'm not sure if he actually did that in the end. If not, we'll get that in there.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the very last item we have before we open it up to Q&A, we've been working on a VS Code integration with Azure Service Operator, and Tats is going to walk us through a quick demo of what that's going to look like. You want to take over the screen, Tats?
Cool, yeah. I'll just screen share. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep. Yep.
Nice.
Can you guys see the VS Code now?
Yep.
Yep.
Awesome.
Brilliant.
Few bits. So essentially, this is how you download from the VS Code ecosystem. You go to extension and you'll download the stuff. There'll be this icon there, which you will click on it. In your subscription list of clusters, you'll right click and you'll hit install Azure Service Operator. And the moment you're going to hit that, it'll start telling you that what it is doing. Right now it is doing Cert Manager, Azure Service Operator, and all that stuff. So the first one is Cert Manager, then it goes roll out the checking of the status. Then it happens like a prep for the OLM CRD resources and all that kind of stuff. It's happening at the background. And in the end, when it is going to approach the service principal, okay, now the service operator namespace starts getting in. Sure Manager. Cool. That's the time where the service principal ID is required. People who know ASO, they will know how to get this. And all I need to provide is these two.
So this is a service principal that the user creates before they go to install Azure Service Operator?
Yep. And that's the stuff probably needs to be documented as well. There was another ping I've done yesterday in one of the threads, Shakti. So yep, you're right. This is, let me just run it through and then I'll loop back. Here's the screen. Okay, cool. It has just run. There was no manual intervention required. We have a namespace running. So when I go to my cluster explorer for TATS ASO, I will have this Azure Services tree node in here, and then I will have all service types, which got downloaded with the Azure Service Operator, which is implemented into this this particular cluster, aka install. And then you go storage accounts, and you will have we'll have like a storage accounts in here, you'll get all the goodies like which you get with the VS Code extension and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty much making things easier and guiding user in its way. To answer the next context, let me share my browser screen again. Okay, cool. Coming back to this one, I think Shakti, your question was around this step 4. That's where user will create their service principal and supply the app ID and the password in the UI. Can you
Awesome.
hear
So
me?
there's a huge reduction in the number of steps that users need if they go through the VS Code extension. They're just responsible for creating the sub ID or creating the service principal from the sub ID and going from there.
It's definitely the easiest way to install ASO, particularly if you're using the extension.
Yeah, no, I agree with you guys. I mean, what we are seeing here is like, so currently where is it at? We are in the PR mode in the VS Code, and it is kind of making more sense connecting the join backwards. What it is doing is it is fixing those Lego pieces for the user. Yes, there will be bits and pieces here and there which user need to do, but organically as ASO will grow in its life cycle, the VS Code extension will become much more mature as well. So essentially, for now, like you saw, there was nothing, no user input was required. All they needed to provide was the service principal and its grid. And I think that's about it. If anybody has any question, fire away.
Yeah, I think that's it. Thank you so much, Tom.
Thanks, Tats.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Cool. And if there are no questions, we'll go ahead and wrap it up here.
Actually, just one other thing to be worth mentioning, Shakti, is that our collaboration that we've been doing with Crossplane. And so Crossplane, we're basically leveraging the code generation work that the guys have done and added like an additional pipeline step that adds the Crossplane references and decorations that their resources require. And so we've got a bit of a proof of concept of that working, and sort of continuing to work with them to have a fully fledged Azure provider for Crossplane that gets churned out of our code generation as well, which would be super cool. Saves them a huge amount of work, and it's a good repurposing of all the work that we've done on our side. And so Matthew Christopher is going to be presenting in their community day coming up on the 15th, and maybe I can post the link to that in the chat as well, so people can sort of see what he's up to, or what we're up to with Crossplane.
Yeah, and I think there's also a blog post talking about how ASO has been working with Crossplane as well.
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah, so so we can track those down and chuck them in the chat.
So I see there's a question on backlog priority, specifically a few resources that folks need support for within a few months. I believe all of the resources that are asked about here are ones that we have prioritized for the code generated CRDs.
Yeah, those issue IDs in the ASO repo, 175, is that what we're looking at there?
Mm-hmm.
Because Kyle, I think you'd spoken with Matthew previously, and there were some resources you had requested. I have a vague recollection of that. Our service bus. Yeah, so I think we've included service bus in our sort of V0, also P0 list of requirement of resources. So 13. Event grid.
And then event grid and signal R.
Yeah, so definitely event grid. Not sure about signal R. So service bus and event grid. We have to follow up with signal R. See if we can include that in that first cut.
All right. Anything else? Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone.
Cool. Thanks
Thank you,
all.
Shakti.
Thanks.
Everyone. Bye.